Hello, everyone. I think it's time to get started. So we're going to do a session about our experience moving from our old Angular application to Next.js and also hosting it on Vercel. This presentation had two parts to it. One is like how do you actually manage to drive that kind of change? Another part is like what are the learnings we made along the ways on going to Vercel. So Elkjøp Nordic, I don't know, Elkjøp, I don't know if you know, everyone know that. That's Elgiganten in Denmark or Sweden and Giganti in Finland. We are the largest electronic retailer in the Nordics by a large margin, I would say. And if you are the largest electronic retailer, you can't have a site looking like this. It's not me that have masked out the prices or the descriptions. This was actually a loading screen for some product carousels that we had on the screen for like 20, 30 seconds, or at least enough time for me to grab the screen snipping tool and take a picture of it. And that's not good enough. I mean, some dynamic content is fine if it streams in fairly quick, but it should not take longer time to serve an image and serve the actual price of the product. So something was really strange with our old application. And our customers actually started complaining. So this is from Reddit. It says in translated to English, as so horrendous, I went going somewhere else. So as you can tell, this also impacted our revenue. People were going somewhere else. So we lost market share because of these kind of things. And here we had another comment from Reddit. You can find many of these if you go back 2 years, hopefully not now. I work at Elkjøp, and I feel your pain, basically. And that's not how it should be. And I was slightly embarrassed working for this, because I was not responsible for the old site, but I still work there, and I still take pride of where I work. And when I joined Elkjøp 5 years ago, there's another fellow speaker who asked me, when will you do something about the website? And I finally did. So that's good. So now we have this sort of scores from the Vercel Speed Insight, which is basically Core Web Vitals, but in a Vercel package. So we have both the desktop and mobile version. We have 70% of traffic is mobile, so this one is definitely more important. We're not perfect here yet, but 99 is pretty good. And if you look at the official scores, we are now mostly on the green on everything. IMP is slightly tricky. We can talk about that afterwards if you want to. I'm not going to do details there. So to seeing is believing, right? So let's see what our page looked like about 1.5 years ago for the old site, and also 1.5 years ago with the new site, and also what it looks like now, roughly. So this video is starting now is how it looks on the old application. And you see I think it's running, yeah, it is running. Someone has done something. It's not super fast. And then we have the new one on Next.js. It's running on Vercel, but we have a CDN proxy in front of it because we do want to do A/B testing with the old solution. So we need to have that initially. And then the last one is without the CDN proxy, which is now much faster. We don't have any less lag when it comes to images, and things are much more snappy. I don't even understand what takes time in the first version of the application. Like, it doesn't take like 5 seconds to talk to our backend API, but for some reason it continues to spin for, I don't know, way too long. So we have gotten the time in this sort of example, and it was not a speed run by me on the last one. It is faster. Like, the buttons are interactive when they should be interactive, and everything slows faster. So we're taking it down for like this first video is almost 2 minutes long. I'm not going to wait for 2 minutes. And the last one is 33 seconds. And I'm doing roughly the same thing. And that's huge for an e-commerce site. It should not take 2 minutes. That's completely insane. So that was something, that's something I did and want to address. So we'll go back to what we did and also how. But first, who am I? I'm Tomas Jansson. I work as a principal software engineer at Elkjøp. So I've been there for roughly 5 years. And Elkjøp Nordic is, as I said, the largest electronic retailer in the Nordics. We have like 10 to 15,000 something people working in the stores as well. So we have both physical stores and online. And the people working in the stores are also our best customers to some degree, because they also use the site and let us know when something is really not working. So they are very important. I've been working like all over the stack throughout my career, and now I'm doing mainly like web development on the e-commerce site. But this whole thing started with me actually doing infrastructure work for the build pipeline on the old site, and then I thought it was ridiculous to do that. So we moved on to actually try to fix the site instead. And I try to focus on where I can make the most impact. I don't care too much if it's infrastructure or front-end work or back-end work, whatever. I try to adjust and just deliver. So how do you get to do such a rewrite in the first place? I mean, the old site, I think we started the rollout like right after I joined Elkjøp. And I don't think the whole old feature was not even done when we started replacing it. And Elkjøp is a large organization, so how do you actually get the organization to recognize that, okay, we really need to move on to this new thing because it's better? I mean, we have invested a significant amount of money in the old solution. And it is not easy for a large organization to accept that that amount will just disappear. So how do you go about actually getting heard and drive that kind of change? And I think one thing we as a developer, I guess most of us are developer at least, are not really good at talking about the actual problems we want to solve. We love talking about technology. I do as well. But management and extra stakeholders doesn't really care too much about which framework we use or which version or whatever. They want to see like more revenue, lower cost, or happier customer, basically, if you simplify it. So we need to like, ask ourselves, like, when we want to use this new technology, ask ourselves, why do you want to do that? And if you can't address one of these three things, then you need to ask yourself why one more time. And if you really can't answer, then it might not be a really good thing you are suggesting. So try to talk about like what is a problem you want to solve. Otherwise, you will have a really hard time to being heard by all the management people and people in suits or the business. And now when you know what the problem is, I mean, it's easy to say, okay, I'm going to lower cost, so I'm going to just increase revenue. But you also need to put some numbers down on how much are you going to do this. Is the investment even worth it to begin with? And that's also why most of the time when it comes to large initiatives, the sort of business side always getting hurt first, because they sell their things using spreadsheets with a lot of numbers, but we don't. So you need to put down the numbers, and it's perfectly fine to make assumptions. I mean, the business doesn't even know what they claim to know. They're making assumptions all the time, and we need to do that as well. And when it comes to our specific case, we address the cost part of it because the operational cost of the old site was way too high. I do think the revenue impact is bigger, but that's much harder to estimate because there are sort of global economics and all kind of things. So we addressed how we can cut down in number of developers because we had like 20 developers doing the old site, and they were mainly external consultants. So if you are a consultant, I think these things is even more important, because if you not try to drive the change, someone might do the change that get you out of the company. So do the math and make assumption, perfectly fine, but have something concrete to talk about. Then I think it's also super important to not do this alone. You have to pair up with someone or a couple of people. I paired up with 3 people. 2 other developers helped me build like early proof of concept of what I wanted to do. And then a third one who was also sort of into tech, but he was more also slightly more business-oriented and know how to actually create a good business case, etc. But he still believed in what I wanted to do. And you need to have someone that is not like you, but complement what you know. And it also makes it much more fun. Like having someone else to like discuss with, who can challenge you and really make sure that this actually makes sense is important. And And if you can't get these like first couple of followers to start with, how will you persuade like the management that are like 3 levels above you? So you need to have more people getting involved and like growing the network of people who might believe in what you want to do. Now we have these things in place. You know what the problem is. You have done the math about the numbers you want to improve. You have a person to help you maybe build a solid business case. You need to do that business case and also tell and show the people. Excuse me, dry throat. And also have something that you can point to in other discussion, like here is what we want to do and here's how we're going to do it. And this is also important. Here you need to present like your assumptions you have, how you're going to validate your assumptions. You got not throw things up in the air and say, okay, we're going to make like 10 million more. Like, how are you going to do it? You need to say how can you validate that? And what we did was actually something we have not done at Elkjøp before. Instead of selling like a whole like large enterprise project running for 2 years, we said, give us 2 months, 3 developers, and see what we can do. And then we can make a decision and maybe us buy another 3 months. And that's super cheap for a company like Elkjøp compared to all other things we're doing. So we get a buy-in to actually do that. And we managed to deliver like, I think 80% of the site in like 2 or 3 months with 3 developers. And then we all know that the last 20% take like 95% of the time. So we were not done after those 80%, but at least we could show that this is going to work and we will have much better performance. And performance drive revenue. And we were only 3 developers compared to 16 or 20 what we had. So that's a huge improvement in all aspects. In these discussions, there was always be people saying, oh, timing is bad. I mean, yes, I can't argue with that. Timing is super bad. The best time to do the change was probably like 5 years ago when we made the wrong decision to do Angular. And the next best option was probably yesterday, which also too late. So timing will always be bad. Of course, you need to find room when it really makes sense, but this is not really a healthy argument, in my opinion. Of course, it is bad. You need to figure when can we start and how important is this compared to all other things we have. And I argue, in our case, I think the business case was so strong, so we should have started like even sooner than we did. So those are things around how to actually go about making change in a large organization. I'm not saying that like, this is the only way to do it, but it's one way. You need to talk about the problem and also estimate how you can make the impact. But let's switch gear to the even more fun stuff of this, the technical part, and why we choose Next.js and also Vercel to some degree. And to understand the decision here, we need to think about what is an application. And when I talk about web applications, I think of them as application on a spectrum. You have like static application on one end and then dynamic application on the other end. And static applications are more like blogs, and dynamic are like trading applications or gaming applications or whatnot, where things are actually changing with every single request. And in my opinion, an e-commerce application is almost like a blog. It's super static. Some people will argue, oh, we have this price and stock changes that changes all the time. No, you don't. If you zoom down on a specific product or a specific SKU, how often does a price change on a product? Like, not often, like maybe once a day. The stock level can change, of course, and if it does, then treat that small part dynamic. But most of the time, we are always using stock levels, and stock levels change at most 5 times a day because we have like 0 to 5, 10, 50, 100 or something. So even if you take stock into account, the product should not update that often. If you zoom in, of course, we have a lot of price changes. If you look at our like 1 million times 4 products, then there's price change all the time, but not when you like zoom in on a specific SKU. So you need to know where are you on this spectrum. And when I know we are more on the static part, so it makes sense to have something that you can render statically on the server. And we had, as I said, an Angular application before. Nothing bad about Angular, but it's not just a fit. That kind of application does not work with Angular. If you can make it work, but you might fight the framework instead of working with the framework. And like Angular might be better on the other end when you have dynamic applications. I would probably not use it there because I don't like how Angular is structured, but that's another discussion. But there you might have a better fit. And with Next.js, you have this server-side capabilities to render static applications, but you can also quite easily sprinkle dynamic content on top of this static page, which I will show some of later on. So you need to know where you are as a whole, like on the large perspective, but also when you drill down on different features, it's good to know, like, should this thing be statically rendered, or do I need to do client-side fetching or whatever? And Next.js was a good fit for us. We could, of course, have gone with like even more performant things, maybe. Could Svelte be an option, or HTMX, or whatever? Definitely. I mean, I have nothing wrong with those tools, but we also need to look at which pool of developers have we available for us right now at the company, and are they willing to commit to working with these other technologies? If they aren't, it's going to be hard to drive those kind of changes. I tried to push technology inside a company before with me like trying to drive some engagement. But if you don't get the full commitment of the other developers, it's super hard to stick with that. So it's better to go a safe route, and React, in my opinion, is super safe, especially with Next.js. So we went with Next.js and React because it checked all the boxes that we needed. So what did we learn along this journey? It took about, for some perspective, it took from we got like the go of doing like the bigger proof of concept, it was less than 1 year until we were live in production. I mean, we were live before that, but less than 1 year, then we had 100% of traffic, which I think is good. So the first part was to the edge and back. When we started, we were on Next.js app router from the beginning, and Vercel also pushed what they call edge runtime. They have stopped doing that now for very good reasons. And I mean, the idea behind on running on the edge, it's super good. If you have the data on the edge as well. And we were sort of blindly saying, okay, they suggest doing on edge, so let's do that without thinking about it. If we had stopped and thought for like 2 minutes, we would realize it was a bad idea. Because when you're running on the edge, the application runs super close to the user. And that's good. Because then you can basically also serve sort of personalized content really well. But the thing is, as I try to illustrate in this image here, is all the calls to our APIs, which we have a lot of, like from the product detail page, I think we do like 15, 16, 70 API calls. We can discuss that in another discussion, but doing all those calls from the edge down to our sort of Azure cluster is quite costly. So if we just move the application like closer to the data center, then that network call will be cheaper and the application will also be faster. And you will also have another benefit of this is caching, because when you're running on Vercel functions, you can actually cache the output response. So we can cache the pages, and you can't do that when you're running on Edge. On Edge, you can only cache sort of the external API calls. So going to the Edge was fun, but it was not a good match for us. Another thing that should not come as a surprise for anyone, network jumps is super costly. As I said before, we had a proxy in front of our application in the beginning, and for good reasons. Like we wanted to roll this out gradually, And to do that, we need to A/B test towards the old solution. So we had another CDN on top to route to both solutions. And that worked fine. But as you can see, I guess you can, when you look at this graph, I guess you can guess when we switched to not having a proxy in front. It was here. So at this time, we went to 100% on Vercel with no extra CDN on top. So Vercel is also our CDN now. And everything became much more stable. And I'm picking time to first byte because that's where you can see it the most. And that also impacts your like first contentful paint and larger contentful paint and IMP in some scenarios. Because if you have like a faster delivery, then you will be able to deliver the content to the page faster. And those things are very important for an e-commerce site because those will impact our core web vitals in a positive way, which will improve our SEO score. So networks jumps matter, and try to really question if you need all the layers that you might have in your technology stack. I don't think if you have like jumps within a cluster, is it of course not as expensive as we had between sort of a CDN to another CDN. That's definitely more costly. And here you can see how the number of percent of traffic actually went to the green score instead of yellow and red. And everything also became, as I said, much more stable. Let's talk about some of the Next.js features. How many have been using Next.js app router here? Or Next.js? A few? Good. Then so you will learn some at least today. That's good. So Next.js has two parts to it, like pages router and app router. If you know that. An app router is sort of their new thing, but they still have the old thing, and it's still like maintaining it. I recommend using app router because I think it works better for me at least, and it's easier to do server-side rendering and stuff like that. And there they have this concept of layout, and then you have pages. And that's the main advantage of this is it gives me some kind of structure, so I don't need to invent that structure myself. Not everyone thinks that's a good idea, because some people really like, oh, I want to invent my own kind of structure. Then Next.js might not be for you, because Next.js comes with a lot of opinions, and if you can't buy into those opinions, why are you even trying to do it? You have to sort of commit to them, otherwise it doesn't make sense. And that applies to most tech, I think. If you can't sort of commit to the idiomatic way of doing things, should you maybe look at other things? Because there are alternatives to Next.js that are really good, so there's no point in hurting yourself with something that you don't like. But they have this concept of layouts, and then you have pages with layouts. So the way that could look like, if you click in demo. So now when this loads, it should flash. So everything, something flash on the screen, that's when that part of the screen is loaded. So if you have this page layout structure and using client-side navigation, we don't do that on our e-commerce site all the time for different reasons, which we can discuss afterwards. But if you have client-side navigation, you get a really good visual stability. So now when I navigate the application, going to the marketing page, you can see only the part that actually changed is what's loaded. And this will change the URL, so I'm going to the marketing page. If I do a reload, everything will load. And then I can have like nested parts, so the order only reloads this orders part. And the way to do that in Next.js is actually quite simple. All the code is available if you go to the link on the slides. But I have a layout part here in this demo. We have this fade-in component. That's why you see the green flashing parts. And then I have like the regular children property, as you do with React components. And this is where sort of the page is injected into this. So it's sort of an island where you inject the page. So when I go to the home page, then I load this layout part. And if I go to orders, I have a new layout which will be injected into that children spot. And that layout, in turn, has its own children, which will be either the sort of order listing page or if you go to order ID, because here you see the routing part in the folder structure, if I go to that page, I will see the specific order. So that's how easy it is to set up routing. And I said, like, it is a very opinionated way. If you don't like it, you should probably look at something else. But if you can live with this, it's worked really well. And React server components. This is probably one of them, like, larger, newest feature in React the last couple of years, I would say. And I think it's more taking sort of the web back to what it was before, like rendering things on the server instead of sending, like creating a SPA application and you start fetching things all over again. For me, this resonates really well if you want to create performance application. Try to do as much as you can on the server and only send HTML. That's a good thing. And having like the same language and same kind of markup on both the client and the server, that's really good. So I'd really recommend to embrace React server components if you start looking into Next.js. And the way it works, everything is a server component as a start in Next.js. So then you have basically a tree, and everything we send the HTML. You will only have like the small Next.js sort of JavaScript if you don't explicitly opt in to actually be a client component, which you do with a use client directive on top of a file. And if you do, then a node might turn into a client component. And you should try to do this as far down as possible, because if you do it further up, then everything below will also be a client component. And that means you will also send all that JavaScript to the client, and it will also take more time for the browser to parse and render that JavaScript and execute it. And that will impact your performance. But there are ways to actually mix these things. So when this client component instantiates the other component, that's when they also turn into components. But if you instead compose it together and up here pass in components to the client, they will actually stay server components. So you can achieve something like this with Next.js. And to show what I mean with that, I have this super nice looking demo. Everything green is server-side rendered. So this is actual application, or this is a code application. And everything red is a client component. So I have this schizophrenic component called server client, because it doesn't know what it is until it actually is rendered. So when it is on the server, it will render as a green, and when it's on the client, it will render as red. So here we have the server page, which is the whole thing here. I pass in the server client, that's the thing you see on the left, and they have a client component, which will be red. But I pass in the server client and the nested server client, and those are the green parts inside here. So here you can see how I combined client and server components together, which is really good. But then also in the client component, that instantiates another server client component, and it will be rendered as red, because now it actually thinks it's on the client. So if you can, you should definitely try to do this on Next.js as much as you can to get a little JavaScript as possible to the client. So internationalization, that was a long word. I18N is probably easier. When we started, we said with App Router, it was very new. So there was no framework or anything to actually do this. And we also had like some weird requirements for it to work, because we were serving markets and maybe not like /en/dk or whatever. So it was actual different markets from the same application. So we need to create our own. And it's not very hard. I will show in the demo how you can start doing that. But there are frameworks to actually solve some of this now. So you should look into that before maybe trying to solve this yourself. But this was our sort of first experience of using Next.js middleware. Because as I said, we have one application, and we want everything, or at least almost everything, to be static. But how can we serve on our sort of route path, serve 4 different countries? because that's what we want to do. We want to serve Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland from the same path. And we want that to be cacheable and static. And we can do that using middleware. So you have a small, very simplified demo here of how we are doing that. So we have the Russian version now. I will talk through, but if you're looking at the URL here, you see it is I18N. And if I switch to Denmark, you see, hey, and it's still the same route. And I think we can also see in the network request that are still getting sort of a cache hit, which is a good thing. Response header there. So I get a response hit saying this was a cache hit. So that's readable, but it's, yeah, that's what it says. And the way we have solved this in this specific case, it is quite easy. All the links down here is actually for that specific country. But what I do there is looking at the path, and if it's n with sort of the country suffix or country code, I'm setting a cookie telling me which country that is. And if I have that cookie present, I'm creating a new URL, which is basically E18N / that path, and I'm rendering that. So from the outside, it still looks like I am rendering sort of /I18N, but I'm in actually, you can actually see that in the request here if you do it again. This matches the route code demos I18N language. So I have rewritten the URL and serving something else from the server. And this is something that's really powerful, and we'll come back to that once more later in the demo. So middleware, if you are in Next.js, learn how to use it in a good way, because that will be a lifesaver in many scenarios. And feature toggling, this is something that almost became like a drug to us. I think we have like 80 or 60 or something now. And it's also the way it actually works with Vercel. So it's partly like feature toggles in general, and also how it works with Vercel. We are using Launch Darkly for it to manage it, but you can use anything basically. And the reason we chose Launch Darkly 2 years ago was they were the first that has a sort of one-click integration with Vercel Edge config. And Vercel Edge config is a super fast sort of storage that you can read from with, I don't know, less than 10 milliseconds or really fast. And that's very important, because then we can actually do that in the middleware and use it to generate our routes that we want to serve to the clients. And the way, when you have it working with Vercel, you can actually just go to this Vercel toolbar, and I have a couple of toggles we can see. And this is something we actually do in production. I did not change for everyone, so this is for my session only, for the toolbar, which is really nice. So now we are in a position where we can actually roll out features in production, and we can go for our own session, toggle this feature on, and see, does it really work the way we intended to? Because some of the things we actually need to test in production, because our test data is not really good enough sometimes. I will turn this off. And the way, if you do this, you should really use the flag SDK. Before it was, it's Vercel that is behind it, but it's not the Vercel SDK. We actually switched to it late this summer. Before that, we had our own that we implemented, but theirs is much better, both performance and other things. And the way it works, if you go to flags, it's like this. You define the flags just as some kind of function. And you don't have to be on Vercel to do this. You can use this anywhere. And this is in the simplest form. But you can also implement like something called identify, which identify the context you are in. And you can use that in your decide function. So in identify, you can use maybe cookies or headers, and then use that to decide the value later on. So the only way I created my confetti flag was that I had a name confetti. That's what you see on the screen, and the decide function saying this should always be false. but then I can override it with my tool in the toolbar. And you can also be more advanced, because these two here is actually backed by the Edge config on Vercel, but they can also be backed by anything else, basically. So really look at it. And if you are on Vercel, you also need to use the flags, routes, to get the flags into the toolbar. So this is basically, I import all the flags from the flags file you saw before, and I'm getting the provider information, and then I'm just returning that to the tool. So this is the endpoint that's getting called by the toolbar. So that's how easy it is to get started with the flags in Vercel and Next.js. Server action. That was fun when that was released. Well, I'm not sure how many heard about that, but it was a lot of drama all over the place, not only in React world, everyone saying, okay, we already have this in PHP and .NET and whatnot. And I agree 100% that parts of server actions did exist. I've been doing like web forms. I did web forms like 20 years ago, and we had the whole thing where you can basically write the code once and have the server action where you're passing sort of the view state that grew to 20 megabytes. I mean, we had it, but it was not good. This is definitely much better. So not every new innovation has to be new. It can also be incremental improvements that takes you further. So what server action does is basically helps you not creating an API endpoint. And you get also some typing for free. And I think that's a really good, if you don't have to write some code, that's a win in my book, because that's, of course, it can feel like magic sometimes, but yeah. It's not really super magic at all, but it's something you should consider using. We're not using it all over the place, to be honest. We are starting switching to TRPC as well for some of the things we're doing. But we have it in some scenarios. So it's really good to know about. And a quick demo of that. Not super UX friendly here, but here we have a simple form. I can type, and then after 3 seconds, it say hello, Tomas down here, I think, hello. And I also can, if I have empty, it returns immediately. And you can also hook it up to a button, so you don't have to be a form. So here I have click me. And if you look at the network, you can actually see that the network is being called on these things. Yeah, and now it takes 3 seconds because I have a short delay. And the code for this, to do demos, server actions. So I have a simple page, which have the form demo and the client demo, and also the toaster thing to show the notifications. And the form demo is very simple. On my action in the form, I point to a client-side function in this case, and this is calling a handle form action. And this function here, handle form action, is defined in my actions.tsx file. I think this can be a TS file, to be honest. And here I have the use server directive. So this tells Next.js this needs to run on the server. You're not allowed to run this on the client. So all it's basically doing is creating you a pipe from the client to the server. And then it runs this code on the server. I'm not running this locally right now, but if we were running this locally, we would actually see this log statement and this log statement be printed in the server console log and not on the client. And this is, for me, it's super convenient to use it where it makes sense, because I don't have to write this extra boilerplate for an API that I need to write. So that's one less thing to think about to get right. So that was server actions. Caching. I don't have a good demo for this because it's sort of tricky, but caching is definitely worth talking about. I think Next.js had good intentions in Next.js 13, but they definitely screwed up the API. What Next.js did in Next.js 13, I think it was 13 or 12, they sort of monkey patched the fetch API in Node and applied sort of default caching strategies to it. So everything was cached by default, and you have to opt out from the caching. And I mean, they have also realized that that was not a good idea. So they have reverted that in next 14, I think, or maybe 15. So don't do that anymore. But caching was definitely, I like caching to be explicit, personally. So I think the whole monkey patching thing to begin with is, in my opinion, wrong. That's one of the things I disagree with Next.js. I think it would be better if they used a composable structure with composing and be more explicit of what you want to cache or not. And that's sort of where also they're heading, as I see it, with next versions of Next.js. But it is sort of, caching is not easy, and they had good intentions. And they are also continuously working on making caching better. And it comes in two different levels on Next.js. First, you have like the page cache. That's the whole sort of page that you render. And that is something you can actually store on the CDN. But they also have data caching for all the API calls that when you're using the fetch, for example, that's stored on a data cache. So you can use both to get a really performant application. But are there endpoints that are using more than one route, for example? Then you can benefit of having data caching to actually read that endpoint. So caching is hard. They try as much as they can to make it good and solid, and definitely in the later versions, it's getting better. One thing that I'm really looking forward to is applying cache tags based on the response. Because today, you can only, when you're making sort of a fetch call, you can also say, this call should have tag X on it. And that tag can then be used to sort of revalidate or purge that cache instance. But in some scenarios, you would actually want to make a call and then tag it with part of the response. Common scenario would be a CMS, because you have the sort of route for the page you want to fetch data for, but what you get back is maybe an ID and the content. And when that content updates, you might get an update only based on ID. So in that scenario, it's really good to be able to cache using that ID or tag it with ID, so you can revalidate based on the events. And that's also something you need to think about. They're both time-based revalidation, where you can say this page needs to revalidate after 60 seconds or 1 hour. Or you can use tags. I really recommend, if you can, to use tags, because then you can cache for much longer. And in those scenarios, you don't know how often something might update. And you can also combine them. You can have like a 1 hour cache validation time, and also apply sort of a cache tags you can use for revalidate. So caching is tricky. I think they are doing okay, but I'm really looking forward to the future features when it comes to caching. This is something that I hope will be a GA very soon. It's still you can test this partial pre-rendering now in the Canary release of Next.js. And I talked a lot about like creating static applications. Today, if you're doing like the latest release of Next.js, you can have a static page or a dynamic page. You can't have like a mixture. The mixture today would then be you have like a static page, and then you have client component fetching in the data. But what you can have, that's what you can have. But what they can with partial pre-rendering is you can have a static shell, and then what you can have on the CDN. And then when you're making a request, Next.js will be able to sort of stream in the dynamic content in that same shell on the same response, which is very good when it comes to both like SEO for one thing, because that will make it possible for you to actually serve HTML on the first request. I mean, the Google bots will be able to execute the JavaScript and get the content later, but if you do it with a client-side thing, that will eat from your crawler budget on Google. So the more you can get on this like first initial response, the better. And the way that might look like, I have a really simple demo here as well. So here you saw the streaming part loaded very fast. And if I do a reload now, you see that only the second box is loading again. So, and if we look at all the requests, you can see a lot of content, but it was only one request to get all the content, which is really good. So can I zoom this part? Yeah. So if we look into my response here, let's take another hello NDC one. And you see both are now loading. And I can search for hello cached. And you see now it actually was hidden initially. And what this means is that that's the way Next.js works. So it is sort of serving the HTML, but it's hidden. And then the Next.js framework is actually swapping in this content when it has actually managed to fill it out. But if I do a refresh now, you will actually see that hello cached, that we are not having this hidden part anymore. Because now it has become part of the static shell, in a way. This part here is always streamed in, so that we'll always have this hidden part, and then when the content is ready, we actually swap it in. So that's a really nice, nice feature. And the way to do this, this is a completely different demo. I have the page here with two different content. You need to have the suspense boundary. That's why you get this loading box first. So you have something to render until you have streamed in the content. And when it comes to the content here, I'm just sleeping for 2 seconds, and then I responding with a box hello stream content. And for the cache content, here you see sort of the new caching API that also will be available. So now I'm saying in the top of this function, I'm giving a directive saying use cache, which basically tells Next.js this function calls or component should be cached or is cacheable. And here you can also see that it should be cached for minutes. And I also have a cache tag using cached content. And it will allow me to, now when I do a refresh here, you will see, because it's been minutes, I think. Yeah, so now it's going reloading that again. Now it's static, but I can also revalidate using that cache tag. So if we go back to the cache tag, you see here I set a cache tag, and the button here is also like a server action directly here, so a lot of things in one component. And there I can revalidate this tag. So it's basically saying this content is old, you need to get new one. So that's how you should, how you can use with partial pre-rendering. Hopefully, it will be available later this year. That's something I really hope for. Because in our specific scenario at Elkjøp, this makes so much sense for sort of product listing pages, where every search is different, basically, but the whole shell is the same. So if we can start serving the shell and then stream in the first set of the result, it will definitely help our SEO and also make a better user experience. So this is something we are following on quite a lot. So some of the Vercel features that we have been using. How many have been using Vercel? Couple. I really, yeah, try it out. It's super fun, and it's free to get started. One thing we're using is deployments. Every single thing you push to Vercel gets deployed. Or not, you don't push to Vercel. Everything you push to GitHub or GitLab or anything, that will be deployed. But that doesn't mean it has to be production deployed right away. You can configure that somehow. But all the default settings, especially if you're using a Next.js application, I mean, if you haven't tried it before, I don't think it would take more than 5 minutes for you to have something up and running on Vercel. That's how easy. I never experienced any developer experience like this before. And also that you have every single deployment or commit is deployed, which also means you can go back to any of those deploys and start that version at any time. So if you have a bug in production, then you can go back like 10 deploys, click that link and see how did that application look like 10 deploys ago. And that way you can sort of find weird issues. So deployments is definitely one of the best features, I think. I mean, you can build these kind of things yourself. This was actually the thing we were trying to build for the old application we had, but that took like 20 minutes to compile. So that's when we had the time to start building the proof of concept for the new site. But yeah, so deployments is, in my opinion, a killer feature. Speed insight is very good if you are, especially if you're trying like doing public sites. Having this sort of baked into the tool you're using is really good. There are other solutions that do the same thing that you can use. But getting this out of the box without any effort is very useful. And we're using it quite a lot to sort of debug how things are going in production. I think, yeah. And also environments. So we have a lot of different environments, like 3 main environments, like preview, that's where we have like test environment basically. Development is our local environment, and then production. But you can create custom environments. So we have like we call it preview main, which is basically when we're pushing our code to our main branch, we will also create a deploy on the preview main environment, which is targeting test. So that way we can always check the latest bits of the code towards the test data we have. So that's also one key feature. Another feature that you have already seen is the toolbar. You can do a lot of things here. You have the feature toggles. You can also go and create comments on the site, and you can write something here, and that you can also hook up with your ticketing system if you want to. You can have things like, do I have layout shift on the page? Where? And it will record and help you find the possible layout shifts. And also interaction timing and social open graph images, can you also look at what that look like. So they're really, really good features. And you can also, there are ways to tracking. Yeah, you can track your session, I think. And you can click a link and get it open up in Vercel dashboard. So the toolbar is also really useful. And we are using the feature toggles the most, for sure. So in summary, to do change like this is very hard, especially in larger organizations. And developers are not heard as much as they maybe should be heard, especially if you are working in traditional organizations like Elkjøp and others. But it is possible. You just need to change how you speak with the management. And people and tech is very important to create a performance application. As I said, I would not have managed to do what I've done without the people in the team. As I said, we are a really small team at the moment. We are 4 developers because we have 2 on paternity and maternity leave. So we are 4 developers at the moment building the site for all the countries. But if you have good people, then that's a good amount of people. It's important to know the characteristics of your application so you can choose the right tool. Just not choose a tool because it's cool. Will it fit for your need or not? And in my opinion, Next.js lets me focus on building the application. I don't need to think about structure and routing and how they're going to build this. All this was basically handed to me, and I can just like create new application, build, start application, or dev run or something. So I don't need to think about that. And Vercel solves the same thing as Next.js, but on infrastructure level. I don't need to think about scaling. I don't need to think about how I'm going to deploy this application. That's also like given to me. We haven't tweaked the deployment pipeline, anything. We are basically just running on a default, created the deployment using the Git integration in Vercel, and click deploy. That's what we've done. And that's super powerful if you can do that, because that allows us to focus on actual building the features and application for our customers. I mean, I think the other things are super fun to do, but that's not where I should spend my time doing what I'm doing now. If we're building something else, then maybe, but building the e-commerce site, then we should focus on building the site and not maybe building the infrastructure and all those kind of things. I think that was all. So don't forget to vote on your way out. Pick any color. And the slides are on the link down in the right corner. And there's a link to the Git repo there for the presentations, which is the slides, and also the demos. So, thank you.